Virgil Abloh is without a doubt one of the most important figures of the 2010s. An impact and global fame unusual for a fashion designer, Virgil was a pioneer and had a whole generation wanting to follow in his footsteps. He was truly one of a kind.
The process and the end product are equally as valuable. I embrace imperfection as much as I embrace the pursuit of perfection.
Virgil Abloh is, to me, one of the most interesting figures of the last decade. In his 12 years active in the industry before his untimely passing, he accomplished things we can only dream of. Most known for his founding of the streetwear label Off-White and his endeavours with Louis Vuitton. This man changed the fashion industry for good. He broke down barriers and created new opportunities for those who wanted to follow in his footsteps. As Virgil accomplished so much in such a short time, we often overlook his unquantifiable impact on the hip-hop landscape.
And I'm thinking of all these ideas, and Virgil's able to take all of those ideas and then architect them, because he is an architect.
Abloh's upbringing is an outliner when it comes to fashion designers, and that is what makes him special. Ghanaian immigrant parents, his mother a seamstress and his father a manager of a paint company. But I'm not here to talk about all of this. I'm here to talk about hip hop, and Virgil first met Kanye in the late 2000s while working on designs at a local Chicago print shop. Virgil interned at Fendi, in the same class as Kanye in 2009, and the two began a collaborative relationship, one that would become famous throughout the years. A year later, West would appoint Abloh as the creative director of his new creative agency, Donda. Now, a lot of people only recognise Virgil's album covers when it comes to his impact on hip-hop, but his work changed hip-hop as we know it. That being said, the album covers Virgil worked on are groundbreaking and are some of the most recognisable in the history of hip-hop. The deflated heart on the 808s cover is just as iconic as anything from the late 2000s and perfectly captures the heartbreak Kanye explores on this album. I mean, Virgil even worked with the legendary George Condor to create the My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy cover, a landmark in hip-hop and an art piece that is recognised worldwide. We then have the Yeezus cover, where Virgil incredibly contrasts the minimalism of the cover with the maximalism of the music. And here you can see the creative process that led to such an iconic cover in the hip hop scene. We have the royalty and luxury to match an album like Watch the Throne, and in this clip you can see the creative process of a genius like Virgil Abloh. The Love Is Rage 2 cover is so iconic at this point and almost defined a generation. In an interview with Vader, Virgil had this to say: "One of the pillars of my design aesthetic is showing the process. That way a whole generation of kids will see themselves in the work and do the work themselves too. That cover is pretty much a ready-made example. You feel like you can peel it off, and that was important to me." We have the Long Live ASAP cover, which is just as iconic itself at this point. A personal favourite of mine is the Pray for Paris cover, which is one of the most recognisable pieces of art in the underground hip hop scene, adopted from Caravaggio's painting of David and Goliath. Just from these album covers you can see how Virgil Abloh's imprint is all over hip hop in the last decade. But you see, it runs much deeper than that. If there is one word you can attach to Virgil's name, it's influence. Virgil is often credited with creating a bridge between streetwear and luxury clothing, and this bridge changed the aesthetic of hip hop forever. You see, one of hip hop's foundations is fashion. That streetwear aesthetic that was birthed in the 70s and 80s was alien to the mainstream at the time. The breakdancing, the tracksuits, the chains. A whole new style from New York was born. Run DMC and LL Cool J are probably the artists who were most influential in this street aesthetic. Then in the late 80s we had artists like KRS-One and Public Enemy adopting more military-like styles. Then in the mid 90s, especially with the rise of rappers like Tupac, Biggie and Diddy, we would see a more lavish style adopted with designer suits, fedoras, skin shoes and designer sunglasses. The late 90s fashion, rep by artists like Wu-Tang with the baggy jeans and Timberland boots, would spill over into the early 2000s. But in the late 2000s and early 2010s, as hip-hop started to become the focus of mainstream media, we saw a shift in the fashion, and Virgil is front and centre of this large shift.
I don't feel responsible to a preconceived notion of art. I feel more responsible to a community that is trying to change the tide, or to sort of live in an optimistic society that art, design, music, and fashion actually change the world for the better.
Abloh launched his first brand, Pyrex Vision, in the early 2010s and centred the brand around youth and drug culture. He transformed basic tees and flannels into pieces that got the world talking, upselling certain items for over $500. Even back at this time, you would start to see the wave Virgil was creating in hip-hop, with artists like Kanye, Jay-Z, A$AP Rocky, Kendrick Lamar and many others being spotted wearing the brand. But it was Abloh's next adventure, Off-White, that would really change hip-hop fashion forever. Even though it took inspiration from his first brand, this time it was all original patterns manufactured in Italy. And this is where the bridge between streetwear and high fashion really started. Those diagonal off-white stripes are some of the most recognisable pieces of art over the past decade. And hip-hop ate it up. You see, for a while, hip-hop hadn't had its own defined aesthetic, especially in the late 2000s. The 70s, 80s and 90s all had their own recognisable forms of fashion, and around the early 2010s, there wasn't a clear form of fashion. Off-White changed the game. This organic blend between streetwear and luxury became the staple of a new hip-hop generation. A$AP Rocky, Future, Drake, Uzi, Dare, Carti, Gunna, Offset, 21 Savage and so many more regularly working with the brand. Hip-hop finally had a fashion identity again. Virgil's work honestly defines a generation of hip-hop. Off-White was mentioned alongside the other luxury brands like Givenchy, Gucci and Versace, and everywhere you look another hip-hop artist was wearing it. Virgil's stock's risen even more when he became the creative director of Louis Vuitton in 2018, and Virgil was a pioneer, so wherever he went, hip-hop would follow, and more artists started wearing the luxury brand. I mean, he even brought Offset and Playboy Carti to model pieces on the Paris fashion show, and Carti said this in an interview with GQ. Walking the Louis Vuitton show was monumental. It was pure happiness, and it was historical for both me and Virgil. As I walked down the runway, it wasn't that hard for me, because it's a lifestyle that I live every day, and people like Virgil know exactly what we're doing. It isn't just the fashion and album covers though. Virgil has a really strong tie to hip hop, dating all the way back to the 90s when he was DJing house parties in high school. I talked about his relationship with Kanye West earlier, but Virgil was also the creative director for Kanye's Yeezus tour back in 2013, which remains one of the most iconic hip hop tours of all time, with the absolutely crazy stage design and scenography. In the same year, he would have his first major music video directing opportunity, delivering an iconic music video with A$AP Rocky and Rihanna for the track Fashion Killer. As I said earlier, Abloh worked very closely with Lil Uzi for his Love Is Rage 2 album, even donning Off-White on the cover. But he also directed the music video for XO Tour Life, one of the biggest songs of the 2010s, and the music video is instantly recognisable with its art style that Virgil created. Virgil continued his DJing alongside everything else, opening up and working with acts like Travis Scott and Tyler the Creator. And you know, this man was so connected to hip hop, and nothing quite shows that like concluding his fall 2020 Off-White fashion show in Paris with Westside Gunn and Rock Marciano's Perfect Plex. This type of song doesn't belong in these type of environments, but Virgil bridged that gap.
sip the chill beverage, devilish endeavors and levers to quench my never-ending list of pleasures. Bitches in pictures naked, dripping necklace.
And you know, Virgil's knowledge of the underground hip-hop scene didn't just stop there. Seriously, just go through who he was following on Instagram. This man was tapped in. His impact and influence on hip-hop culture can't be quantified. As I said earlier, Virgil was a pioneer, and he had an entire generation of hip-hop artists following his every move. Throughout his career, Virgil transformed modern rap fashion. He redefined high-end luxury clothing and brought hip-hop along with him. His blend of streetwear and luxury fashion felt organic, and in a way, he was part of the hip-hop culture. And I guess that is why hip-hop has a love for him. Hip-hop was originally a counterculture, with its own distinct world of fashion, but now hip-hop is arguably the most influential culture in the world when it comes to mainstream fashion trends. It's done a complete 180, and Virgil, well, he's probably the most important piece of that. Anyway, yeah, thank you to anyone who made it at the end of the video. I'm quite happy with this one. I'm still trying to get my voice down, but the visuals have improved tenfold, and so as long as I keep seeing improvement, I'm going to keep doing this. It's just a creative outlet anyway, so I'm just going to do whatever I want. But anyway, thank you for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one.